It's a pleasure to once again thank our sponsor of the series, Dr. Eli Barron. Thank you so much, Dr. Barron, for your generosity in making this series happen. It's really a privilege for me personally and also for our community to host tonight Rabbi Paysach Krohn, who is an author of 13 books and counting, and a fifth-generation Moel, and he told me that he has one son-in-law, who are also a Moelim, so it's continuing into the sixth generation. Rabbi Krohn is perhaps best known for his 8-book series now of Maggid stories, and Rabbi Krohn, if you've ever read his books or you've heard his lectures, and you're going to have the zchut and privilege to hear it tonight, he just has a certain passion, enthusiasm, sincerity, and an incredible art of storytelling that conveys tremendous values that are so important for our lives. So it's without further ado, but I did hear also, he also leads trips to Europe, and Carol Pearl just told me that she and Sherry Gargir went on a trip with Rabbi Krohn. They went to Morocco, Spain, Gibraltar. That was fantastic, out of this world. So thank you so much, Rabbi Krohn, for being here in Beverly Hills with us this evening.
It is a great zchus and a great honor to have been invited by Rabbi Top and by Rabbi Posey to come to speak to all of you. Rabbi Posey has been just wonderful to make all these arrangements, and I, believe it or not, I still haven't met him. But so wherever he is, tell him thank you. But you know, I must tell you, you must be such a fabulous congregation. And I'll tell you why. You see, I remember Rabbi Top when he was the assistant rabbi in the Young Israel of Woodmere with Rabbi Blvd. And he was so young and so handsome. So I thought, I'm going to come here. I'll say an alter mensch, you know, with white hair. He's so cute and handsome like he always was. What a great congregation. It's unbelievable. So it's a pleasure to be here. My dear cousin Mimi Castle is here. I've seen Carol, who came with me on the trip, and others, Mr. Tritel, all these wonderful people that I've gotten to know over the years. And tonight we've come to speak about a very, very important topic. And that is the topic of shalom, of peace and unity. And the question is unity really an illusion? Is it really possible? But let me tell you something what the Medrash tells us about shalom, about peace. The Medrash tells us, Godol shalom. Peace is so important. Shekol habrachais v'toivais v'nechamais. All the good, all the blessings that we say always end with shalom. Think about it for a moment. At the end of Shemoneh Esrei, what is the last bracha that we say? Sim shalom. We ask Hashem, please, there should be peace in Israel. There should be peace amongst ourselves and our families and our communities. When the Kohanim come up here and they bless the people, what are the last words that they say? V'yasem l'cha shalom. There should be peace on Klal Yisrael, in families and communities. When we bench after we've eaten bread, the last words that we say, Hashem oz, la'ama yitein Hashem yivarech hasamo v'shalom. The last Mishnah in the entire Shas, the last Mishnah ends, Loimotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Keli Machzik Bracha. There is no vessel that is greater for Judaism than shalom. And I once saw something so beautiful. The Hebrew word for vessel is Keli. That's a kli. You know what it stands for? Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Isn't that beautiful? Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. That's the keli, that's the vessel that is machzik bracha. And so the question really we ask, is it ever possible that there should be such unity? And of course there was. There really was. It was when Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai. The Torah tells us, Vayichan Sham Yisrael. They rested there. It should have said, Vayachanu. They rested, in the plural, Lashon Rabim. And Rashi tells us, Ke'ish echad, b'leiv echad. Like one man, one heart. So somebody will say, okay, that was because they all knew they were getting the Torah. But there's no way that millions of Jews are going to get together to do the same thing. Well, it just happens to be that this Shabbos it's going to happen. Because this Shabbos is one of the greatest Shabbosim in Jewish history. Probably, since the time of Har Sinai, there will never, so far, there has never ever been so many people, over 1 million people were involved in the Shabbos project of 2014. 1,000 people were at a Friday night Shabbos dinner in Melbourne, Australia. 1,000 people last year. 4,500 women were in Buenos Aires. We're not talking Los Angeles. We're not talking Brooklyn. 4,500 women in Buenos Aires, many of them never cooked challah in their lives. You know how many people tomorrow night are getting together in various places to bake challah? I just looked it up today because I heard that in Brooklyn, they called the Guinness World Records. Listen to this. They want to bake the largest challah ever baked. The record is 9 feet. Some guy in Chabad did it in Penn State University. In Brooklyn, tomorrow night, they're going to make one 26 feet. Could you imagine? In Israel, last year, 70 cities and towns had 50,000 people that celebrated Shabbos, and many of them for the first time. And, you know, when I was putting these statistics together, somebody said to me, "You're going to LA. You know they're closing Pico Boulevard." Now, to me, that's like unbelievable. Are they really doing that? That's what I heard Eishat Torah is doing. They're closing Pico Boulevard. That's unbelievable. That shows that if we really want to, we can get together and be as one. That's the beauty of Klal Yisrael. We just have to want to. It's not an elusive thing. Many people think unity is elusive, but it can happen. And I'll tell you something. I remember a year and a half ago, Rahman al-Islam, when Naftali, Gilad, and Ayal were kidnapped. And I always wondered, why did Hashem make it that for 18 days nobody knew where they were? For 18 days, everybody prayed. Every conceivable type of Jew. I'll never forget, I was in Zurich. Friday night, I was in a place called the Erika Shul, which is a Hasidic shul. Every person in that shul had an upturned hat, a beard, a gartel, and a long coat. I was the only one that looked like me. And then, before Kabbalah Shabbos, the Gabbai got up and he said, "Now we're going to say Tillim for the 3 boys." And I tell you, the Tillim that those Hasidic people said was so powerful, I literally started crying. And you know why I cried? Because I was thinking that if these Hasidic people would have seen those kids 3 weeks earlier with their kippahs rugot, living in areas that the Hasidim don't usually live in Eretz Yisrael, they probably wouldn't look at them. But now, in this time of crisis, they were davening as if it was their own children. So why do we need an Eis Tzara? Why do we need a crisis and then we're all together? We should be bigger than that. And that's what we came here to learn tonight. How can we be bigger than that? So we don't need Chas v'Shalom, an Eis Tzara, a time of crisis, so that we should be able to be as one and have unity. One of the answers is sensitivity. Many of us are not sensitive enough. What happens is that we say things and we think that people are going to forget what we said, and we shoot from the hip. And sometimes you hurt someone and you don't realize it. I remember one time at a Torah Masorah convention, which is an organization, an umbrella organization for many day schools throughout the country. Rabbi Avram Palm, who was at the time the Rosh Hashiva of Torah V'das, those of you who have ever read or saw him or spoke to him know he was the softest and the kindest person. And he got up and he told us something that was amazing. Because I remember when I studied in Torah V'das, he was not the Rosh Hashiva at the time. He was a Rebbe of one of the classes. And he told at this Torah Masorah convention that one night at PTA, a mother came over to him and said, "My son says that you hate him." And Rav Pam couldn't believe it. How could that possibly be? Rav Pam was the kindest person. He loved every Jew. He says, I love every Jew, and especially my students. How could your child possibly think that I hate him? And he said, and the mother said, well, because you call on other kids in the class more than you call on him. He said, I promise you, I will make sure that I'll be more attentive. And he told us he went home that night and he was just so distraught. And then all of a sudden he thought of a pshat in a pasuk. Listen to this. You and I could learn this pasuk 150 times. We would never think of it. And listen, because of this incident, how we understood a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk tells us, in Bereshis Chavtes pasuk Lamed, Vayehav games Rochel meleah. Yaakov loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. That's what the Torah tells us. We all knew Yaakov thought he was going to marry Rachel. And he wanted to marry Rachel. She gave over the signs to Leah so she wouldn't be embarrassed. We all know the story. The next pasuk says, Vayar Hashem. Hashem saw Kisnua Leah, that Leah was hated. Where does it say that Leah was hated? Where does it say Leah was hated? It says in the previous pasuk, Vayehav gam es Rachel Leah. He liked Rachel more than Leah. So Rav Pam said, of course Yaakov didn't hate Leah. But Leah felt hated. That's why it says, Vayar Hashem, Hashem saw that Leah felt hated. Not that Yaakov hated her, but because Yaakov obviously showed more love to Rachel than Leah, Leah felt hated. And that's what Rav Pam understood. That's why this child thinks that I hate him. Not because I hate him. I don't hate anybody. But because I gave more attention to another boy, so this boy felt hated. That's a very important lesson in family life. It's a very important lesson in employee-employer relationship when there are many different employees in the workforce. Are you showing a certain favoritism that another person will feel that they're hated and then might cause some problems in the office? You don't dislike that person, but you're showing a favoritism. And listen to this. We find that the Torah tells us an amazing thing as well. Vayiru Echov, the brothers. After Yosef was born and Yaakov loved Yosef, this was the son of his beloved wife Rachel, the Ben Zekunim. Vayiru Echov, the brothers saw ki oisai ohav avihem mikol Echov. They saw that he really loved Yosef more than he loved them. Vayisnu oisai, they hated him. Who did they hate? They hated Yosef. V'lo yochlu daber l'shalom. They couldn't anymore speak in peace with him. We have a very big responsibility to be sensitive to people's feelings, not only to the ones that we talk to, but to the ones that are around and are on the periphery. Because everybody is sensitive. Everybody wants to be validated. Everybody wants to be loved. And if that's the case, we have to be so careful, because otherwise it brings machlokes. So how we're going to change? So I want to tell you a great story. Now this story is so beautiful as it develops. It has nothing to do with peace, but the lesson that Reb Chaim Kanievsky, one of the greatest Torah scholars that we have today, learned from this is applicable to what we've come to talk about. But listen to this story. There was a fellow, let's call him Nachman. He went through the yeshiva system in America. He became a very wealthy young man, prosperous fellow, and he moved his family to Israel. And every once in a while, he would come back to America. He would come back to New York and did some business. And then sometimes he would go to visit his non-religious Israeli cousins in Miami. Now, it was ironic because this fellow Nachman had moved his family from America to Israel, and Nati and Zahava kind of ran away from Israel and went to Miami. So Nati and Zahava knew that when their cousin Nachman comes, obviously he's not going to eat in their home. They don't keep kosher. So they would go to a Miami kosher restaurant, or they would take out some kosher food and eat on plastic or paper dishes. And a couple of years ago, Nachman comes down to Miami, and he sees that the kippah on Nati's head kind of fits him very well. It looks like it belongs there. You know, every time when he came in previous years, it was obvious that Nati had just put on the kippah 5 minutes before his cousin came. But now it didn't look like a triangle, you know? It looked like, you know, like a real kippah is supposed to look. And then he looks around and he sees there's mezuzahs on every doorpost. And he looks at the dining room table and there's a sefer there. He can't believe it. A Hebrew book. He says, Nati, has there been a change here that I don't know about? He says, yeah, we became religious. We became Balei Tshuva in the last 2 years. He said, well, that's amazing. How did that happen? You didn't even tell me. He says, I'll tell you how it happened. He said, it was one late afternoon. My wife and I were sitting on our porch. It was very hot in Miami. And suddenly we see a whole group of well-dressed people in suits and ties, shirts, hats, and they're going to the water. Now, we know in Miami, if somebody's going to the water, he's not dressed in a suit and a tie. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's Rosh Hashanah. These people are going to Tashlach. I remember Tashlach as a kid. He said, I hadn't been in Tashlach for years. He said, I don't know what possessed me. I went inside my house, I took my kippah, I put it on my head. I said, I'm going to walk with these people. I got to see Tashlach. I haven't seen it in years. So he said, I'm walking along with the people. Obviously, you know, they realize I'm an outsider. But then as we get there, and everybody's standing by the water and reading from their machzor, somebody says to me, you read Hebrew? He says, do I read Hebrew? I'm an Israeli. So they said, would you like to say the portion, this chapter that everybody's saying? He said, yeah, I'd like to say it. I haven't said it in years. And he says it. And then somebody comes over to me and says, did you hear shofar today? He said, actually, no. So the guy says, would you like to hear shofar? I happen to be the Baal Takeya in the shul, and I happen to have my shofar with me. So if you want, I could blow shofar for you. He said, you know, I haven't heard shofar for years. That would be nice. So the guy takes out a shofar. Imagine you're standing by Tashlach, all of a sudden by the water, guy's blowing shofar, right? Like, where did that happen from? And 30 koilas, the guy blows, and he thanks him, and he's about to leave. And the guy who blows shofar says, I just want to tell you, my name is Moshe Katz. And Nati was thinking, who cares? Like, we're not going to be friends. Like, well, what's the difference? He said, I just want to tell you, my name is Moshe Katz, and in case you want to make a connection with the synagogue, I'm not so far away. The synagogue is not so far away from here. And he thanks him again, and he's about to leave, and he says, just, remember my name, Moshe Katz. And like he was thinking, this guy's ridiculous. Like, we're not keeping up a friendship. So he comes home, and he says, and his wife says to him, no, so how was everything? He tells her, what happened with Tashlach, and they ask him if he could read, and he said, of course, he's an Israeli. He said, then this guy, Moshe Katz, blew shofar for me. She says, what? He said, what do you mean? She said, who did you say blew shofar? Moshe Katz. Like, what's a big deal? She says, Moshe Katz blew shofar for you? What? So he says, well, what's up? She says, you're not going to believe this, but my grandfather in Bialystok, his name was Moshe Katz. He died many years ago. He was the Baal Takeya of the shul. He blew shofar for the people in Bialystok. I can't believe that after all these years, a guy, Moshe Katz, blew shofar for you. Well, both of them, they just could not get over it. I mean, this was not just a stomach coincidence. This was like heavenly orchestrated. It was obvious. So after the holidays, they both went to the synagogue. They spoke to the rabbi. And the rabbi was so warm and friendly and encouraging. And he said, and he brought us back to religion. And we became Balei Tshuva. Well, they embraced, they were so happy. And finally, when Nachman goes back to Eretz Yisrael, he goes to everyone. And he's telling everybody the story. And finally, he comes to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. And he says, Rebbe, do you believe this story? It's amazing, isn't it? Rabbi Chaim says, these things happen every single day. Hashem orchestrates these things that happen, but sometimes we just don't see it or we don't get to understand it. But this happens every day. So Nachman says, Rebbe, do you mind? I'd like to ask you a question. Now listen to the question. The question is a great question, and the answer is even better. He says, Rebbe, if God wanted my relatives to become religious, why didn't he send Moshe Katz 10 years ago? Good question, right? You know what Rabbi Chaim answered? God waits for people to take the first step. And as soon as your cousin put on his kippah and went down to Tashlach, God sent him as Moshe Katz. And that's what the answer is in so many things in life, especially with unity. We've got to take the first step. You can't wait for anybody else. You come up with an idea of bringing peace to a family, to a community, then you go out and you do it. You don't wait for somebody. You know what the Talmud tells us? An amazing thing. In the Gemara and Brachas, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it was said on him, Shelo hikdimu adam shalai me'olam. There was never anybody who could say hello to him first. He always said hello to everyone. Afilu nochri shebeshuk. It made no difference whether the fellow was Jewish or not. He's a human being. He's God's creation. The bus driver, the policeman, whatever, the mailman, it makes no difference. You take the first step. You say hello first. As a matter of fact, the Mishnah in Avos tells us an amazing thing. Rab Masya says, "Have a magdim shalom l'chol adam." Initiate. You be the one to take the first step, and you say hello to everyone. Makes no difference, Jewish or not Jewish. And listen what he says. Because you know why? If you say hello to people, you smile, and you make them feel like human beings, they will love you. And there's nothing more important in this world than that people should love you. That's what the Tiferes Yisrael is writing. The greatest thing that you could have is that everybody should love you. That's amazing. You know how that happens? I once heard something fabulous. You could write it down. You won't believe it. The word creation and the word reaction are spelled with the exact same letters. Reaction and creation. Every one of us has to decide in life. Are we people of creation or are we people of reaction? Most people are people of reaction. You can't do that when it comes to unity. You can't do that when it comes to peace in a family, peace in a community, peace in Klal Yisrael. You got to be the one that's creation. Look at Rabbi Warren Goldstein in South Africa, a very close personal friend of mine. He came up with the idea of keeping Shabbos together. I am sure that many people in South Africa and all over the world told him he's crazy. How are you going to get people to keep Shabbos? They never kept Shabbos before. Millions of people, because of one man, thought of the idea, and he went to the plate, and he came forward. That's what leadership is all about. Every one of us can be a leader. You don't have to be a leader of a whole community. You can be the leader in your family. You can be a leader in your neighborhood, where you bring peace, and you step forward, and you magdim shalom l'chol adam. That's what it's all about. And so how are we going to do that? I'll tell you something very interesting before we talk about the practical aspects of how to do it. My Rebbe, Rabbi David Cohen, once showed me this. This is absolutely incredible. We all know that you're not allowed to wear shatnez, right? You're not allowed to wear something that's wool and linen together. Any man who buys a suit usually has the suit checked to make sure that it doesn't have shatnez. Why? Where does that come from? So, most of us think, just like by Pora Aduma, there are certain things that are considered a chayk, that it's just a law, but we don't have a reason for it. I'll show you Medrash Tanchuma in Bereshis. You won't believe it. Ois Tes, number 9. Cain, we know, brought a gift to God. Hevel also brought a gift to God. Cain brought Mipri Adama. He brought from the earth, that's linen, Zera Pishtan. Hevel brought from the sheep, that's wool. Says the Medrash, God says, Einoi din, it doesn't make sense. Sheyis arev minchas hachoitei im minchas zakai leficha nesar. God says, every time I think about wool and linen, I think of Hevel and Cain. Hevel brought me wool from the sheep. Cain brought me linen. That led to the first machlokes. That led to the first killing. I can't have my people wearing wool and linen. It's too painful for me. Isn't that amazing? That's why we don't wear shatnez. Then the Arizal says something brilliant. There's only one person who's allowed to wear shatnez. Anybody who could tell me besides Rabbi Top and Effie Stern, God, you tell me who. What? I didn't even tell you what the prize will be. I was going to give you a CD. I'll give it to you. He's right, the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol can wear the avnate. The avnate is the belt. Zok the Heilige Arizal. The Holy Arizal says, you know why he can wear it? Because what is the essence of the Kohen? He brings peace. Ohev Shalom, V'roidev Shalom. He brings peace and he searches after peace. Such a person, he's undoing what happened with Cain and Hevel. He can wear shatnez. That's incredible. Because until now, we always thought that shatnez was one of these laws that has no reason. And now we see that it has an incredible reason. So I believe that the way all of us can change tonight, and all of us can foster love and unity in Klal Yisrael, is by becoming giving people. Stop thinking only about ourselves. And I'll tell you an amazing thing. We know you're not allowed to count Jews. It's an ayin hara. So if we wanted to know how many people were here tonight, we would count the ticket stubs. Or we would, give, as the Torah says, give a machtas shekel, a half a coin, and then everybody, Moshe or whoever it was, would count the coins. And when the Torah is describing this, it says it in a very interesting way. It says, v'nosnu, and they shall give. I just want to show you the word v'nosnu so you could see it. Vav, nun, tov, nun, vav. You can read it frontwards and backwards. Anybody know what those words are called? Palindromes, right. Radar, mom, pop, race car. My daughter's name, Aviva, back and forth, right? All palindromes. So the first night of Slichas, I said this point in the Lower East Side. A guy came over to me afterwards. He said, Rabbi Krohn, I want to tell you the greatest palindrome you ever heard. I said, go ahead. Now, you have to write it because you won't believe it. Bernie Weinreb. It's unbelievable. I don't know if there's a Bernie Weinreb in this shul, but he's a palindrome, let me tell you. It's amazing. I have no idea what that signifies, but whatever. But I just had to tell it to you. So now, listen to this. So the Baal HaTurim tells us an amazing thing. Why is the word v'nosnu and they shall give? Why is it a palindrome? Loi malach, he says to tell you. Masha adam noisein, that which a person gives, l'tzedakah, that which you give, your talent, your encouragement, your heart, your finances, yachzor love, it's going to come back to you. That's why it's a palindrome. You can read it forwards and backwards. Because when you give, you're going to get back. Every one of us sometimes needs from others. We all have challenges. We all need each other. And God sees if you give out to others, v'nosnu, somebody's going to be there for you. But you could take the first step. You could become a giving person. You know why? Because it's the greatest investment in life. The greatest investment is to give others because it's God's guarantee, v'nosnu. Somebody's going to be there for you as well. That's how it happens. And I'll tell you something amazing. There's a very interesting medrash. It's a Tana Devei Eliyahu. And it tells us that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was once walking outside the area where the Beis HaMikdash lay in ruins. And his Talmud, Rabbi Yeshua, went behind him and he said, Rebbe, look, it's terrible. How are we going to get kapara? How are we going to get forgiveness? There's no Beis HaMikdash anymore. And the Rebbe said, Beni, my child, al yeraloch, don't be worried. Don't feel bad. Yesh lanu kapara, there is a way that we can all get forgiveness. What is that? Become a giving person. Become a kind person. Become a person who doesn't only think about yourself, who goes out and helps others when they need it. And he says, that's what the Pasuk says. Ki chesed chofatzti. That's what I want. I want kindness. I want consideration. V'loi zavach. It's not that I'm looking for your kabonos, for your sacrifices. That's not how you're going to get kapara when there's no Beis HaMikdash. You want to get forgiveness? Become a kind person. I would like to tell every single one of you, and I guarantee you that your life will change. Tonight, from tonight on, if you can, keep this diary. Just write down one chesed that you did for somebody else today. Every day, no matter, even if you do 10, you only write down one. I'm not talking husband for wife, wife for husband. That you got to do if you know it's good for you. I'm talking about outside the house. You took another child to carpool. You called a grandmother who's alone in a nursing home. You arranged a shidduch. You made a call for a shidduch. You did something. And I'm telling you, your life will change because the pasuk says in Tehillim, Hashem tzilcha, God is your shadow. And so I want to share with you something amazing. I remember the first time that I went to Manchester. I love going to England. I love traveling in all these wonderful places where there's so many wonderful Jews. And so I was in Manchester. It was the first time I was there. I was on my way, literally, I was leaving the home where I was staying, and I was on my way to give a speech for 500 women. And somebody stops me, says, wait a second, you've got to stop someplace on the way. I said, what are you talking about? People are waiting. No. There's a woman who has MS. She's a brilliant woman. She's in a wheelchair. Her body is getting more and more paralyzed. Her body is deteriorating, but she's brilliant. Her name is Rebbetzin Chavi Wakshal. And she asked that you should just come to see her just for 2 minutes on the way to the speech. So how are you going to say no to a woman who's in a wheelchair? To a woman who's never has MS and is suffering in such a terrible way? So I come in there and they tell me that she's about to give a lecture to 25 women. Anybody have a tissue? By the way, that'll be your chesed for the night. Okay, but anyway, we'll get one. So I come inside. There's 25 women sitting around the table. Thank you. Oh boy, there you go. 1, 2, there you go. Oh, I'm telling you. It's unbelievable. We're going to be here all night, folks. Okay, thank you. You know, when they check me at security, they're going to say, what are you doing with all these tissues? So I come in there. There's 25 women sitting around the table. She wasn't in yet. And then they open up a curtain and they wheel her in, and my heart falls. It's a young woman, not even 40 at the time. And she's in a wheelchair. It's just heartbreaking. And she says to me, Rabbi Krohn, I need you to do me a favor. And I'm thinking, like, no matter what she asks me, how am I going to say no in front of all these people? And she says, you know, I've listened to your CDs and I've read your books, and I'm writing a book about the adversity that I'm going through. And please write me a letter for the book. And I said to her, you know, I've never done that before. You have to be a big tzaddik to write a letter for somebody else's book. And, you know, maybe you could get like a big rabbi to do it. And she says, no, I want only you to do it. And I said to her, you know, I haven't read the book, and I'm going back to New York, in a couple days. So she was, of course, one step ahead of me. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, well, I know that, but I can't tell him that, then he'll feel bad. Anybody else got water? No. Okay. So what happens is, so she says to me, she wants only me to do it. And she had the book ready. I said, okay, I'll read it on the way back. And I promise you that if I like the book, I'll write you the letter. I started reading the book on the plane on the way home. I couldn't stop crying. And she's talking about how humiliating it is to be in a wheelchair in front of everyone. And I think the most painful page in the book is when she talks about her daughter's 8th grade graduation. All the mothers dressed so beautifully. Everybody looks so nice. And the children are proud of the parents, and the parents are proud of the children. And she knows that her daughter's so humiliated at the way her mother looks like, and the mother feels awful that the daughter feels awful. It is just horrible. But then there's one sentence in that book that is so mind-boggling that the second I read the sentence, I took my highlighter, I underlined it, I checked it off, and I said, for this sentence alone, I'm going to write her the letter. And I called her. I said, Rebbetzin, this is not a book. This is a Sefer Kodesh. This is a holy book. And I'll be honored to write the letter. And let me read to you what she wrote. This is not her thought. This is the thought that she got from someone else. Because she always listened and read things that give people that are in difficult situations, give them encouragement. And she writes like this. Any fool can count the seeds in one apple. You don't have to be a big chacham to just open up an apple and count the seeds. Any fool can count the seeds in one apple. But only the highest power, Hashem himself, can count the apples in one seed. And that's brilliant. You know why that's brilliant? Because sometimes you plant a seed of friendship, or you plant a seed of encouragement, and you carry that person through that difficult time, and then the person's life blossoms. So many apples grow from it. You read a shidduch to someone, and it works out. And then you forget about them, they forget about you. But they go on, they build a family, children and grandchildren. You make a call for somebody to get a job. And we know, the Talmud tells us, that chas v'sholom, if a husband is not employed, it leads to many family problems. Peace in the home, shalom bayis is disrupted. So you get somebody a job, you make a call, and he gets a job, and he feels like a human being again. He's able to go to work, he feels like he has a purpose. And then he gets a better job and a better job. And you forget about it. You did it a couple years ago, but look at all the apples that grow from that seed that you planted. And that's what we have to do. We have to plant seeds. And I want to tell you a magnificent story that a certain Rabbi Mordechai Yaffe, I don't know if you know Rabbi Mordechai Yaffe from the 5 towns, there's a yeshiva called Mesifta Teres Yaakov. He's the Menayel. He told me an amazing story that happened in Hamilton, Ontario. Hamilton is about 20 miles southwest of Toronto. And he tells me that in the early 1950s, there was a man, his name was Rabbi Mordechai Green. He was a short little man. He spoke Yiddish. He was the rabbi of the Orthodox shul. Probably that's why he got the job, because all the old people there, they all spoke Yiddish. And he knew that the shul was a tiny little place, but the young couples weren't going there anymore. They were going to the big, gorgeous conservative temple and the Reform temple. So he knew he better build a big, beautiful shul, because otherwise the young couples are not going to come. It's not attractive enough for them. So he goes to the Royal Bank of Canada, and he says he wants to speak to the bank manager. And the bank manager comes out, a tall, good-looking Episcopalian, Mr. Amy. He says, sit down. He said, what can I do for you? It's the early 1950s. He says, I'm a rabbi of a synagogue, and I want to build a new synagogue, and I need $150,000. Would you be able to give it to me? And $150,000 is a fortune today. Imagine what it was at that time. And he didn't want to use the word Orthodox because he knew that the Orthodox people were not wealthy in Hamilton. And Mr. Amy obviously must know that. He knows who's wealthy and who's not. How's he ever going to get paid back? So Mr. Amy says to him, what kind of synagogue you want to build? He says, I want to build a Jewish house of worship. So again, he's avoiding the O word. But then he says, what denomination do you want to build? So now he had no choice. He said, I'm an Orthodox rabbi, and I want to build an Orthodox synagogue. And Mr. Amy just stops, and he just stares at him. And suddenly Rabbi Mordechai Green sees that tears are coming down Mr. Amy's eyes, and he's crying. And Mr. Amy composes himself, and he says, Rabbi, I'm going to give you the money, and you'll be able to build a synagogue, but I want to tell you why. He says, in the late 1920s, I lived in Timmins, Ontario. I looked it up. It's 400 miles north of Hamilton. He said, my father was killed in a fire. My mother was destitute. She was alone with me, my brother, and my sister. And we had nothing. And you know, in these small towns, they have the general store. The general store sells everything, hardware, food, and clothing. And the man who owned the store was an Orthodox Jew. His name was Sam Bukovetsky. And one day, Mr. Bukovetsky comes to my mother, and he says, Mrs. Amy, I just want you to know, as long as I own this store, your children will have clothes. I will never ask you for any money. Just come in and take what you need. Whenever you want, you can pay me, but I will never ask you. And then he said, Mrs. Amy, let me tell you, as long as I own this store, your children will have food. You never have to go hungry. You come every morning and take what you need. One day you'll pay me whenever you want. I will never ask you. And Mr. Amy, who's crying now, says, we only survived because of that Orthodox Jew. I was able eventually to make myself, to get through school and to go to college, and I became a bank manager. He said, when I saw you walking into the bank, you looked like an Orthodox Jew. And I thought to myself, you know, it's about time I paid back Sam Bukovetsky. And when you said you were an Orthodox rabbi who wanted to build an Orthodox synagogue, I knew God sent you. Imagine that. And that gorgeous shul is still there today. Today, Rabbi Daniel Green, Rabbi Mordechai Green's son, he's the Rav of that shul. Look at the apples. Look at the apples that were planted by that man, Sam Bukovetsky, back in the end of the 1920s. And you want to hear what's the most amazing thing? Rabbi Mordechai Yaffe, who told me the story the past winter, he said, I grew up in Hamilton. He said, my father did not let me go to a yeshiva. You know why? Because he was a Holocaust survivor. There were no yeshivas in Hamilton. He was afraid to send me out of town. So I didn't step into a yeshiva until I was 17. And when I was 17, he let me go to Ner Yisrael, to Ner Israel in Toronto. He says, look at me today. I always say to the boys in Mesivta Ateres Yaakov, look at me. I started learning Torah when I was 17, and today I'm the menahel, I'm the principal of 300 kids. Imagine, boys, he says, what you could do. You started in the first grade. But look at the apples. The apples, Mr. Bukovetsky is surely in heaven. And he's looking down at all the students of Rabbi Yaffe. He's looking down at all the members of the synagogue in Hamilton, Ontario. Why? Because he planted seeds. And that's what we have to do. Because the seeds plant and they grow and they'll produce apples. And sometimes it'll even be in a different generation that we're in. But that's what it's all about. And Hashem keeps a scorecard. And when we give, God gives back. And if he doesn't give you, he'll give your children and your grandchildren. It's a guarantee. Hashem Tzilcha, God, is your shadow. That's what it's all about. So I want to tell you an unbelievable story. This story was told to me by the person himself to whom it happened. His name is Herschel Weber, a Hasidic Jew in Williamsburg. He told me one day he was walking home. He happened to be in a kollel. He was walking home and he sees a guy in the street. Oh, the guy said, I feel terrible. I got my heart. And the guy falls. And he runs to yell, to get a doctor, to get the fire department, the police department. By the time the police came, the guy passed away right in front of him. And he told me that the worst thing was that he overheard one police officer say to the other, if we would have been here 5 minutes ago, we could have saved this guy. So he goes and he gets oxygen tank, and he takes a first aid course, him and 2 other friends, and they decide if there's ever going to be a medical emergency in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, they'll be able to call him. And people began to call him anytime that there was an emergency because he took the course, first aid medicine. One night was an old woman, close to 90, and she's lying in bed, she's sleeping next to her husband, and the next morning, she begins to talk to her husband, he doesn't respond. And she pushes him, and he's not moving. And she realizes, oh my God, he must have died in his sleep. And she's panicking, she's yelling, and she's screaming. She runs to the front window. She says, help, help, I think my husband died. And somebody yells, get Herschel Weber. And he comes running with his tank, and he comes upstairs. And of course, he couldn't do anything. Obviously, the guy passed away in the middle of the night 5 hours ago. But by that time, a whole crowd came. Now, I'm going to tell to you exactly how it happened. It's not nice what I'm about to tell you, what somebody did. But I just want to tell it to you because of what the result was. Now, it's a big crowd. He comes outside. It's a big Hasidic crowd. Now, I don't know how many of you understand Yiddish. I'm going to say it in Yiddish because that's how it happened, but I'll translate. As he's walking down the stairs, he overhears one guy say, You see that crazy guy Herschel? Etim geharget. He's the one who killed him. And of course, what the guy meant was he shouldn't have gone up there. He should have got a regular doctor. But of course, it was ridiculous because he had died 5 hours ago. He said when somebody said that he killed that person, he ran home. He started crying. He couldn't stop crying. He said, how could one Jew say that about another Jew? How could somebody say that about me? And the next morning, he went to the great Satmar Rebbe. And he said, Rebbe, I believe that it's time that we should make an organization that would know emergency medicine, that would be able to help people in case of an emergency. And the rabbi said, bring me a Shari Tshuva. Now Rabbi Top and the other Talmidei Chachamim here know that the Shari Tshuva was written by Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the greatest Rishonim, one of the greatest Talmudic scholars that we have. And listen, he quotes from the Shari Tshuva, the Rebbe does. Shar Gimel Siman Ois Ayin Aleph, the third essay, the third chapter I should say, note 71, and it says like this. V'toy v'nochain ma'oid. It's very good, liyos b'chol ir ve'ir, in every city there should be misnatvim ba'am, volunteers, menamaskilim, intelligent people. Liyos nuchainim u'mazumonim, they should be ready. L'chol devar hatzola, for every source of rescue. The Rebbe said, start the organization and call it Hatzola. That's how Hatzola started. Could you believe it? One man, Herschel Weber planted a seed. He went and he got an oxygen tank. He took a first aid course. Is there anybody here that doesn't know people that were saved by Hatzalah? Either their lives were saved or they were helped from injury because of Hatzalah. One man, he took the first step. Imagine the apples that this man has. He's probably in his 80s or 90s already. Unbelievable. He had an idea and he went with it. You know, Reb Tzadok says there's three things you got to believe in. You got to believe in God, you got to believe in Torah, you got to believe in yourself. You have an idea, go with it. Rabbi Warren Goldstein had an idea of Shabbos, he went with it. Herschel Weber had an idea of Hatzalah, he went with it. Imagine how many apples these people have. They're no different than all of us. They're not geniuses. They believed in themselves. And in our families, we can be people of creation. We don't have to wait to be people of reaction. If you have a sister-in-law that you haven't spoken to in 4 years, and you don't even remember anymore why you haven't spoken to her. Who over here doesn't have a sister-in-law that they haven't spoken to in 4 years? Or a brother-in-law in 8 years? Right? Every family has it. We have to stop. It's enough. We have to take the first step and say, come for Shabbat. Come. Let's get together. Let's go out. It's enough already. We're ruining our family. We're ruining our children. We have to set an example for the future generations. You have to be willing to take that first step. That's what Reb Chaim Kanievsky said. When this guy put on his kippah, that's when God sent him his Moshe Katz. So I want to tell you a story about a person you may know. I don't know if you know Rabbi Yehuda Zakatinsky. Rabbi Yehuda Zakatinsky has a wonderful organization, a Kirov organization. It's called Hashivenu. He helps all those young Balei Tshuva, the boys and girls that come back from Israel. They don't have a whole network to get shidduchim, to get jobs, and he helps them. He's wonderful. So he told me that just recently, a certain Rosh Hashiva, which obviously I can't say the name, he calls him up and he says, you know, I have a son that's no longer religious, and he's in a certain college. Could you learn with him? Could you talk to him? Rabbi Zakatinsky says, of course. Just give me the college, give me the address, give me his phone number. Of course I'll call him. I never refuse to help somebody that is falling away from Yiddishkeit. He says, I want to tell you why I never refuse, Rabbi Zakatinsky says. He says, I remember, he says, I came from New Haven, Connecticut. And in high school, I went to one of these big yeshivas, and the standard of learning was much higher than what I was used to. And then on one Shabbos, the first year that I was there, I was falling behind, and I went to the Beis Medrash. And there were older fellows learning, and I went over to one of the guys. I said, could you please help me? I'm stuck, you know, I'm falling behind in my class. And the guy said, I'm so sorry. I have a study partner, Chavrusa, that I learn with on Shabbos. I just can't. I went to a second guy and a third guy. Everybody had other excuses. And he's telling this Rosh Hashiva, there was one guy left. And I said to myself, if he doesn't help me, I'm leaving the yeshiva Sunday morning. I'm out of here. I said, I went over to this fellow, and I said, could you please help me? And the guy put his arm around me. He said, of course, let's sit down, let's learn together. And we learned it was so wonderful. And the next Shabbos, that fellow came over to me. And he said, remember we learned last Shabbos, do you still need help? Come, let's learn together. He said, I felt so good. And of course, I stayed in the yeshiva. And he said, Rosh Hashiva, you know who that person was? He says, that was you. And the Rosh Hashiva said, are you serious? I don't remember. He says, of course you don't remember, because you were helpful to every child. Was it only me? So now look at this. This fellow, who eventually became a Rosh Hashiva, helped this Yehuda Zakatinsky v'nosnu. Now, Yehuda Zakatinsky is going to bring back his child. That's what it's all about. And I just want to end just with this beautiful, beautiful thing. You know, I couldn't help but notice when I was in Rabbi Top's office that magnificent picture that he has of Rabbi Yosher Ber Soloveitchik, who was with the great geniuses of our time. So I want to tell you a little story. I want to tell you a story, first of all, before we get to Rabbi Yosher Ber, and it's going to lead into that, and with that we'll close. All of us are old enough here to remember Vietnam. And we know that that was one of the greatest fiascos that the United States was ever involved in. We lost thousands and thousands of soldiers. Well, you could look it up tonight. There was somebody named Captain Plum, Plumb. He was a jet fighter pilot on the Kitty Hawk, which was stationed outside of Hanoi. And he flew 74 missions. They're called sorties. He had one more sortie to fly, one more mission. And after that mission, he was then going to come back to America. He had finished his tour of duty as a Navy pilot. He flew that 75th mission. The plane was shot down. It exploded. He had his parachute on, and his life was saved, but he landed in enemy territory. And he was in prison for 5 long years, and he was tortured every single day of those 5 years. He finally came back to America after the war. He was rehabilitated, and he became a public speaker, a famous speaker around the country. And he writes, one night he was in Kansas City. He was sitting in the restaurant alone, and there was somebody on the other side of the restaurant that was staring at him. It was very late at night. They were the only ones in the restaurant. It's very uncomfortable when somebody is staring at you when you're alone. And he tries to eat his food. He looks up again. The guy is still staring at him. Finally, the fellow who was staring comes over to him and says, "You're Captain Plum, right?" He says, "Yes, sir. How do you know that?" He says, "You were on the Kitty Hawk outside Hanoi, and you flew 74 missions. Is that not correct?" And now Captain Plum stands up. He says, "Yes, sir, but how do you know that?" He says, "On the 75th mission, it was shot down, and the parachute saved your life. Is that not true?" He says, "Yes, sir, but how do you know that?" And the fellow says, "I was a sailor on the Kitty Hawk, and I packed your parachute." He could not believe it. They get into a conversation, and he realizes this guy was really on the Kitty Hawk, and that was his job, building the parachutes. He said, "I can't believe I'm meeting you. Do you know how many times I've prayed for you and your family? You saved my life. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to meet you." And they get into this whole wonderful conversation. And then after he left the restaurant, he says he felt terrible. You know why he felt terrible? He said, "I bet I saw that sailor 100 times on the Kitty Hawk, but not once did I say hello to him. Not once did I ever thank him because I was a jet fighter pilot. He was only a sailor. But he packed my parachute. And if he packed my parachute, I owed him thanks." And he said, "How many people do we have in life that pack our parachutes and we never thank them? Our parents, our teachers, our rabbis, our friends who were there when we needed them. Do we ever call and say thank you to those people who packed our parachutes?" And I was so touched by this story, I was thinking, is there a Jewish source for this? And then I remembered something that happened to me when I was 15 years old. When I was 15 years old, my father, Olav Shalom, was a great Talmud Chacham. He wasn't a Rav in a shul, but he was a great Talmud Chacham. And every Tuesday night, he would go to the Moriah Synagogue in Manhattan, and he would hear a shiur from Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. Every single RCA rabbi was there because Rabbi Yoshe Ber would learn Gemara for an hour, and then he would talk on the Parsha for 15 minutes, and every rabbi had a speech already made. So it was packed. So I remember one Tuesday night, my father says to me, "I want you to come with me. I want you to hear how Rabbi Yoshe Ber gives a shiur." Now, I came there. The place was packed. I recognized many of the rabbis there. They were learning Masechta Megillah. I don't remember what page it was, but I will never, if I live to be 160, I will never forget what he said on the Parsha that week. It was Parshas Vayishlach, and he read 2 psukim. He said like this. It says, "Vatomas Devaira meinekes Rivka." Devaira, the nursemaid of Rivka, died. And Yaakov gives her a very big eulogy, and he calls the place Alon Bachus, the plain of crying. And then the next pasuk tells us, "Vayera Elokim al Yaakov od." God comes back to Yaakov a second time. And Rabbi Yoshe Ber asked, "Who is this Devorah? Who is she? What did she do? Why did Yaakov give her such a big eulogy? And God comes and visits him a second time?" And what he said was absolutely ingenious. And he said like this. He said, Devorah means a bee. Some say it's the queen bee, some say it's the worker bee. But the queen bee, or the worker bee, whichever one it is, that bee goes around many, many flowers. And it never lands on a flower unless it knows that it could get nectar from that flower. It has an innate sense to know which flower it should land on. It lands on that flower, gets the nectar, and brings it back to the hive. Rabbi Yoshe Ber said, this Devora was raised in the house of wicked, nasty people, Lavan and Besuel. One was a bigger Russia than the other. But she knew, Rivka, that's the one I'm going to land on. That's the one that I could develop. And she developed Rivka. She made Rivka who she was. And Yaakov knew that this was the one who packed his mother's parachute. And Yaakov knew that Rivka packed his parachute because Yitzchak didn't think that Yaakov was a tzaddik. He thought Esav was a tzaddik. That's why the Ramban tells us, as the woman Devorah got older, Yaakov says to her, come with us. We're leaving Lavan. We'll protect you the rest of our lives, the rest of your life. Come with us. We'll take care of you. And that's why when she died, he gave her the big eulogy because he realized this was the one who packed his mother's parachute. And God sees, oh, this is a person who has Akaras HaTov. He recognizes the good. He appreciates those who pack his parachute. I'm coming back to visit him a second time. That's how you bring unity. Because everybody owes something to somebody else. But we take it for granted. Maybe before this Shabbos, call your parents. Call a friend. Call a teacher who you haven't spoken to in 30 years. And tell them, you know something? You made a lasting impression. Maybe I never thanked you enough. And that teacher will live this Shabbos in a way that they never lived before. There are a lot of people out there who pack out parachutes. And that's how you bring unity. The Balkora, the shul, the rabbi, the shamas, the president, the grocer, everybody does something for everybody else. People are packing out parachutes all the time. We should say thank you. We should recognize the good that others do, even if they get paid for it. Everybody's got to make a living. But if somebody's doing something good and you thank them, that's how we bring shalom. That's how we bring peace. That's how we bring unity. I just end with this fabulous thing that my father-in-law, Shalom, always used to say. I don't know where he got it from, probably from the Reader's Digest. And he said like this, you will never forget this. The word united and the word untied are spelled with the exact same letters. The only difference is where you put the I. Think about that. You put the I in the right word, in the right place in that word, then we're united. A shul is united, a community is united, a family is united, Klal Yisrael is united. But if somebody puts the I, the ich, the selfish I in the wrong place, oh, then a family is untied, a marriage is untied, a community is untied. That's what we have to remember. That's what it's all about. And it's no accident that in the word community, you have the word unity. Because that's really what a community is all about. Fostering unity. Hashem should bless each and every one of us. That we should make a commitment tonight, before this great Shabbos of Achdus all over the world, that we are going to reach out to somebody that we might not have reached out to before. Somebody who maybe have packed our parachute. Somebody that we have to become friendly once again to bring Achdus. Because the Medrash Tanchuma tells us, Ein Yisrael Negolin. Klal Yisrael will not have the redemption until we are as one. Let us become as one. We'll be able to go to Eretz Yisrael together with Mashiach. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.